Welcome to History, Facts, and Mysteries, the channel where we delve deep into the most extraordinary, astonishing, and sometimes inexplicable events from our past. Today, we explore one of the most gripping tales of human endurance and survival, the miracle in the Andes, the story of Flight 571. This event, which shocked the world, involved a Uruguayan rugby team whose plane crashed high in the Andes Mountains in 1972, facing brutal cold, starvation, and seemingly impossible odds. Their fight for life became a legendary testament to human resilience and willpower. But beyond the survival story lies an enigmatic mystery. How exactly did these young men manage to endure, and what secrets does this ordeal still hold? If you love uncovering the hidden layers behind famous historical events, make sure to subscribe to History, Facts, and Mysteries and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new video. The story of Flight 571 is well known, yet it raises many questions that historians, psychologists, and even scientists have pondered for decades. Was it merely luck and human grit that saved these men, or were there other elements at play? Today, we will examine the details of the crash, the struggle for survival, the moral dilemmas faced by the survivors, and the rescue that captivated the world. Let's uncover the full enigma behind the miracle in the Andes. On October 13, 1972, a Uruguayan Air Force C-130 Hercules left Uruguay for Chile, carrying a total of 33 people, 12 crew members, and 21 passengers. The plane was supposed to make a stop in the Chilean city of Santiago, but it never made it. 5 days later, a search party found the wreckage of the plane in the Andes Mountains, with only 16 survivors. The wreck was more than 3,000 meters above sea level, which is about 10,000 feet. What made this tragedy particularly mystifying was that the survivors had managed to stay alive for so long in such harsh conditions. And even stranger, their ordeal wasn't over yet. What had caused the crash, and what did the survivors eat when they ran out of food? Welcome to our channel. And today, let's find out the story behind the miracle in the Andes. It was an ordinary day for those aboard Flight 571. There were no mechanical problems reported when the flight took off from Uruguay at 7 a.m. The flight path took them through some pretty rough terrain. This included flying over the Chilean coastal mountains, the Andes. But the pilots knew the route well, and the weather was good. So there was nothing that suggested that something bad was going to happen. An hour into the flight, the pilots contacted air traffic control to tell them that they were in the process of preparing for their descent toward Santiago. However, at 8:19 a.m., contact was lost with Flight 571. For the next 4 days, rescuers searched for the missing plane, but came up with nothing. They sent out airplanes, helicopters, and ground teams all over the country looking for the plane. But after 4 days of searching, they still hadn't found anything. The military was starting to believe that the plane had been lost forever. However, on October, a group of mountain climbers stumbled upon the crash site, and it was quite the scene. There was a layer of snow on top of the plane's fuselage. The wings were torn away and scattered across the mountainside, and there were human bodies strewn across the wreckage. Only 16 of the 33 people on board had survived. At first, the survivors were very weak and couldn't speak. It took them a few hours to be able to respond to questions put forward by the rescuers. Apparently, the pilot had lost control of the aircraft while trying to navigate through the mountains. They went off course and struck one of the mountains at a low altitude. The impact had killed many of the passengers instantly, while others had died due to hypothermia, after being exposed to the harsh climate of the Andes. As time passed, the rescuers noticed that the remaining passengers seemed to be getting stronger, and this was despite them having eaten nothing but snow since the crash. You see, the survivors had refused to eat the corpses of their dead friends, even though that would have been the most logical thing to do, given that they had no other source of food. But they simply couldn't bring themselves to do it. When asked why they didn't eat the corpses, one of the survivors said, "We decided not to eat the corpses because we might need them if our relatives come to look for us. We had to take care of ourselves in case we were rescued." The decision paid off, too, because when the news broke out about the crash and surviving passengers, the relatives of the deceased decided to set out in search of the crash site. Thanks to the preparedness of the survivors, these people were able to identify the corpses of their loved ones and return them to the cities for burial. But where did the survivors get the strength to wait so long without food? Perhaps they were fueled by revenge. You see, the people who survived the crash were mostly young adults between the ages of 19 and 24 years old. Now, while this age group is known to be rather impulsive, it's also known to be extremely strong. A lot of them were probably in the military and had probably been trained in handling stress and difficult situations. And this came in handy during the disaster. What's also interesting is that this particular flight had been booked by a rugby club called Old Christians Club from Uruguay. Their families had apparently pooled together money to send the team to a tournament in Chile. The crash claimed the lives of 15 of these rugby players, along with 3 crew members, and the oldest person on the plane was just 37 years old. To put things in perspective, the average age of a rugby player today is 26. While the passengers were undoubtedly strong, they would eventually have to succumb to starvation. After a few days, the survivors started feeling nauseous and weak. Even though they had refused to eat the corpses, their bodies were starting to break down, and they needed sustenance to keep going. One of the survivors wrote in his journal, "The hunger was terrible, far worse than you can imagine. I could not take my mind off food." Since they had no other choice, the passengers finally decided to eat the corpses of their fellow passengers. This helped them survive a little longer, but it also complicated matters for the rescuers. As mentioned earlier, the relatives of the deceased passengers had gone to the crash site after hearing about the incident, and understandably, they were shocked to find out that their loved ones' bodies had been mutilated. This led to infighting among the group, which made the rescue operations much harder than they had to be. In fact, the survivors revealed that the passenger who had died in the crash had turned violent and attacked another passenger before being shot and killed. Apparently, this man had snapped due to the stress and physical exertion involved in the ordeal. Luckily, the bickering didn't last long, and the relatives eventually agreed to let the rescuers take their loved ones back to the city. Once the relatives had left, the survivors finally agreed to eat the corpses. Although they had starved for days, they didn't want to hurt the feelings of the relatives. What's amazing is that, despite their situation, these men had held on to hope. They believed that someone would come to rescue them, and refused to give up. However, they started losing hope as the days went by and they started hallucinating. In fact, one of the survivors later revealed that he had hallucinated for about 18 days straight. During that time, he saw his mother several times. He also saw fish and meat, but it was all a figment of his imagination. In addition to hallucinations, the survivors also started to develop strange tastes. Some of them started craving chocolate, while others wanted to eat nothing but strawberries. When they were rescued, one of the survivors reportedly vomited a lot, presumably because his body was rejecting the nutrients it had been denied for days. As if all of this wasn't enough, the survivors had to endure frostbite. Since the crash site was more than 3,000 meters above sea level, temperatures dropped to about -20 degrees Celsius at night. The survivors huddled together for warmth, but this didn't always help. In fact, by the time rescuers arrived, 12 of the 16 survivors suffered from frostbite, which meant that their fingers and toes had turned black. Doctors had to amputate the affected limbs to save the survivors. In spite of everything they had endured, only 8 of the 16 survivors fully recovered. 6 of them either died from complications related to frostbite or injuries sustained during the crash. But those who did recover became known as the miracle of the Andes. Some experts say that the reason the passengers were able to survive for so long was their age. Most of them were young and healthy adults who likely had a better chance of survival than the general population. Others say that the crash site, although cold, also had some advantages. The area received a lot of sunlight, and there was a nearby stream that the passengers could drink from. And perhaps most importantly, the crash site was relatively easy to spot. All these factors combined to help the passengers survive for as long as they did. Today, there's a memorial erected at the crash site to honor the victims of the crash, and the story of the miracle in the Andes has been told countless times. In fact, there's a movie based on the incident that goes by the same name. Thank you for joining us on History, Facts, and Mysteries. If you found this deep dive into the miracle in the Andes fascinating, please subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary stories from history's shadows. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay curious and keep uncovering the mysteries that shape our past.